Good afternoon. My name is Adam Jones with the Whitman County Library System. I am a digital navigator here today to talk to you about selling online, which is one of my favorite topics. So we're going to get started into this. And speaking of getting started, there's a few logistical things that we have to keep in mind. Anything above $400 typically is considered a business and no longer a hobby expense or hobby income. So you do need a Department of Revenue business license, which typically is sole prop or sole proprietor. But if you do want that additional limited liability, you'll want that LLC application. Now the LLC one is anywhere between $250, sometimes $300 to just form it up and submit the paperwork. A normal sole proprietor one is significantly less. The other thing to keep in mind with your logistics is that you will need to track and remit all sales tax to all states. There's been a lot of regulation in that area over the last 10 to 15 years, and it's just safer to send it out, do it, and have it all set. The other thing to keep in mind is that you will be taxed in your state and federally, and you will need a universal business identification for your banks and online vendors. So that what is typically called a UBI number is what you will get from the state after you file that business license application. It is also recommended to get an FEIN, which is a federal employee identification number. And this is like a social security number for your business, creating its own entity. That way, when you're doing business transactions or submitting paperwork, you're able to continue to obscure your own social security ID number. So we do recommend getting that set up ahead of time. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is how much money do you think you will bring in with online selling? And that's going to determine quite a few things. When we look at the three different ways to sell, we typically look at marketplaces, platforms, and independent sites. Your marketplaces are like your Facebook, your Craigslist, or some online forums that you may be a part of in the community. Platforms like eBay, Etsy, Amazon, Reverb, there's some pluses and minuses to all of them. Versus owning your own e-commerce site using a platform like WordPress, Shopify, Wix, or Squarespace to build out your products, your inventory, and sell in a normal e-retail environment. And so what's the difference? The number one difference is fees. No matter what we do, we're always going to not only pay taxes, but we're also going to pay additional fees, usually in the form of transaction fees. And each of these three areas are going to have pluses and minuses for how they approach them. In a marketplace, typically there is little to no fees. And these are really good for if you're doing about $1,000 a month or less on average. And they don't require you to submit business paperwork, registration, or other things of that nature. You just get your items, you post them on Facebook Marketplace or on Craigslist, and you wait and see if somebody DMs you, you make an arrangement, and you're able to exchange money in the manner that you need. That being said, you can do cash, check, but you can also do card with your PayPal, Venmo, or even Facebook Pay. All of these options are available, and your buyers are going to expect to have a variety of options available. Cash is always king in these types of environments, but some people do prefer Venmo, especially for the buyer protection. In case the item is defective or not quite as it was described, they're able to get their money back and kind of go through a escrow negotiation process. If you are sold on eBay or other platforms, PayPal has kind of pioneered this. The nice thing in a marketplace is people are already congregated. You already know that, especially if it's a forum, that people are already there and wanting these types of items. So you just have to post, hey, I have these car parts for sale, or I have these home decoration items or antiques. Hit me up, I'm looking for X amount of money or best offer. And there's no paid advertising required. Your audience is already in one place, ready to go. Some tips on how to do that, especially in terms of Facebook, have a good looking Facebook profile. If you obscure your Facebook profile too much, people are not going to trust you. If there's no picture or it looks like a very outdated picture, or if there's no information about your city or your location, or even posting that you're a real person, some people can misconstrue that as a scam or spam account. If you're in business, you need to make sure that you look credible. And the more credible you are, the more sales you can get from that buyer trust. especially in a Facebook environment, they do have seller and buyer ratings. So high communication and having stuff purchased really quickly from friends to kind of boost up that review rating will help you succeed in the long run. That being said, to make sure that you have quick responses, do have the Facebook application and Messenger on your phone at all times so that you are able to respond within 2, 5, and 10 minutes. If you're waiting 6 to 10 hours to respond, if they have a legitimate question, just say, hey, I will respond to that after I finish up work, and I'll be able to get you those additional pictures or be able to answer those questions. That builds a lot of trust and a lot of credibility and a little bit of onus on you to keep accountable to make sure that that transaction is going to happen. I've actually been able to snatch stuff from other people just from being responsive. And what I mean by that is there may be people that are 1 or 2 buyers kind of lined up to purchase a car or another object. And just because I'm responding actively, they say, hey, I know there's two or three other people, first come, first serve, but if you're able to make it before these other people, I'd love to do business with you. That is a wonderful place to be because there is trust and credibility in proper, prompt, professional communication lines. Just as you would in a normal retail business, those things translate to the Facebook Marketplace environment. So then if we're looking at something a little bit higher up, maybe not quite a Facebook Marketplace or another platform like an eBay or an Etsy or Reverb, why would we look at that? Well, the primary reason is because those audiences already exist. They already advertise and set up searches for you, and they collect those sales tax and remit it to all the states. Now, usually these fees are going to be higher than in some other use cases, but man, if they're doing all the paperwork for us, that's a wonderful place to be. They will also typically, depending if you have enough, and IRS has gone back and forth on the necessity of a 1099-K, so do talk to your tax accountant or lawyer. Typically, eBay will provide you a 1099-K tax document. That is really, really good. It kind of acts like a W-2, but for your side online business or your primary online business. There's also multiple ways to buy and sell in these platforms. Usually you can do an auction format or a buy now format. And this is a better use case if you're between $1,000 and $5,000 a month in sales. Now, why would we really look at these and how would we do it? Well, it's kind of like the Facebook Marketplace or internet forums. Your audience needs to be there. For example, eBay has a multitude of options, a multitude of players, and it's pretty fantastic. I even bought a seersucker suit from someone in New York for a local event. And it was a mostly tailored suit to my body's type, and I was able to get it off of eBay. Now, I could find some of those similar items on Etsy, but eBay had what I needed. That being said, when we look at a platform like Reverb, Reverb is a platform that is specifically for musical instruments. Now, Amazon might have musical instruments, eBay has musical instruments, but anyone who is shopping on Reverb is specifically shopping for those musical instruments that you may be wanting to sell. So knowing where the audience is and how they're operating is one of the best places that you can be. We do have to look in terms of fulfillment of items. Amazon has a multitude of fulfillment options where you can sell your own items and ship them from you, or you can sell the items, ship them to Amazon, and they'll ship it out for you to whoever the buyer is. Of course, once again, taking care of sales tax and those other taxable documents. But of course, we have to be mindful of those fees. Etsy, part of their platform and their niching, is a craft gifts and unique items platform. I buy a lot of gifts from them for either for family members or out-of-towners or just as things come up and are as needed. People know that Etsy is the place for crafted items. And they do typically sit between a 6 to 10% fee in terms of that sales transaction. So if you are selling an item for $100, do expect that you're going to pay about 10% in fees plus an additional in shipping. eBay, of course, has their hunter of items. Reverb has exclusive music equipment. But because they're more exclusive, they have a 5% flat fee plus transaction fee. Now, most of these places are going to have a 2.9% transaction fee. That's pretty standard across the board, but some vendors may give you a break depending on your volume. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, that being said, as much as we love platforms and all the things that they do to help us, I always say be careful with the platforms. They can disappear. There were a few use cases a few years back where Apple and Amazon made a deal where Amazon was finally allowed to sell Apple products if they got rid of Apple refurbishers. And that was kind of a bummer because there were a lot of people who lost their businesses and their livelihoods just because of an externality. But if you have all of those email addresses, you are able to transition that audience to your eBay store or to an independent store or to a different platform, depending on your items. And we do highly recommend getting those email addresses. It's always easier to have a repeat buyer instead of finding a new buyer. And it's a great way to sell online and has the highest return on investment of any digital advertising. Now, when we look at independent sites, there's a lot of advantages. The number one thing is you own it. The site, the look, the appearances, the branding, the design, the company culture items, you own all of that. There's not like an eBay wrapper going around it or Etsy with its own sponsored advertising positions for other products that may or may not be similar to yours. When someone's on your website, they are on your website and looking only at your products. And when we talk about email marketing and you have that list of individuals, it is almost like printing money where you say, hey, I've got a special. You blast out an email to your repeat customers and they're happy to come purchase your items and be good to go. It can be a wonderful, wonderful experience. And we do prefer this for people who are making about $5,000 or more per month. And at this rate, you're not paying for platform fees or other types of listing fees like you would the other platforms. You're only paying your transaction fees and your cost of goods sold, or your COGS. Typically, like I said before, you're looking at a 2.9% plus 30 cents per transaction. That is pretty standard depending on volume. Now, there are some vendors that you are going to be able to get closer to a 1%. But once again, volumes, minimums, but then integrations. When we look at how to host that online system, there are a few platforms that are out there to help you. Shopify is one of the biggest players in the space, and they take care of your taxes, your shipping, your general templates of the orders. They even have options inside the dashboard for email marketing, thank you emails, and even invoices at only about $40 per month. Now, that will scale as you kind of check the box. Oh, I want this feature. I want that feature. But Shopify can do a lot of really, really good things for you. Squarespace, Wix, and WordPress, they will provide you a more custom design, better design on your transactional emails, meaning, hey, your order has been shipped, transactional emails. Sometimes they are a little bit easier to approach, especially with a Squarespace or Wix, where you're kind of dragging and dropping objects, clicking and building your items. And they'll take care of some of the paperwork and some of the taxes, and even some of the shipping labels. Shopify kind of is like an all-in-one box where Squarespace and Wix and WordPress were not necessarily meant to be e-commerce platforms, but have those add-ons and capabilities. And typically you are going to look at a hosting fee for your website, which is approximately $20 a month. Wix and Squarespace might be more or less. You might be able to get a more economical hosting plan for WordPress, but that's not something that we would recommend. So you're going to be wanting to look at about $20 a month plus those transaction fees. Now, the real cost for running these independent sites is in building the site. Having a Shopify designer come in and assist you is one of the better paths to make sure that it has your brand and your culture and your styling. And so do expect between $1,000 to $10,000 in fees to a marketing agency or another group that can build these out for you. And with Wix and Squarespace, they're kind of DIY which is the cost of your time. Or if you work with a preferred partner, you're going to be looking between $500 and $3,000 to get that design and those things up and running the way you need it to. So which is right for you? Well, it depends. And we say that a lot around here. Some questions to ask. What is your estimated revenue? How real do you want this to be? And how much paperwork do you really want to do? And that kind of helps us shape this conversation of, should I pay for an independent website, or should I use eBay, Amazon, Etsy, Reverb, or just stay with the marketplace? So as we shape this part of the discussion, we ask the question of, should I pay for the website? Is it really worth the long run investment? And of course, it's always going to depend, but we can come back to the idea of fees. If you're at $5,000 a month, and you're kind of at that cusp that we were talking about, $5,000 a month is approximately $60,000 a year. And when we look at eBay, which rounding up is going to be approximately a 15% transaction fee, well, now you're looking at about $9,000 per year, which before your cost of goods sold, before your shipping fees, that's a huge chunk of your profit margin being evaporated in transaction fees. Now, if we look at this chart here, you can see that, over the course of 10 years, you're going to be paying $90,000 in transaction fees, which is just an exorbitant amount. But if you did do a one-time investment and a pretty hefty $5,000 one-time investment into Squarespace, and then you're only paying that 2.9% transaction fee, well, that $60,000 is only at $6,800 for that first year. So you're already saving money at that price point, and then you're saving money every year afterwards. So in those fees, you're actually able to save quite a bit and be able to nurture that long-term audience and long-term business. But hopefully that was helpful. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please put them in the comment section down below. We would love to help with this further. If you have other more direct questions, feel free to call the Digital Navigator hotline. It'll be in the description below. We are happy to talk about how you can set up your own online business, or any questions that you have with hosting or with selling or any of those other items. We are here to be a resource to meet your digital navigation needs. That being said, my name is Adam Jones, and have a wonderful day.